Welcome to this DigitalGrads quick course on how to take the perfect photo. We'll be showing you the tips, tricks and tech you need to take a picture perfect photo every time. No more blurry selfies. So let's go. Of course, to take a photo, you need a camera, but you probably already have one on your phone, which, to be fair, do a decent job in taking photos. The cameras you'll find on Apple, Google and Samsung phones are very effective at taking photos on the fly, but sometimes to take a perfect photo, you need something that has a few more options on it. So, what are the drawbacks of using your phone to take pictures? Phone cameras can't have new lenses put on them, unless you use those awful clip-on ones that don't actually work. And some can't change the exposure or speed of which a photo is taken as much as a DSLR camera can, because they don't use as much mechanical elements. So much less complex lenses and not using internal mirrors like a more professional camera. So maybe getting a proper camera is a better bet. Just don't get something like this. Retro is always popular, but no one wants to wait around half an hour just to take one photo. In that regard, Sony make the best consumer level DSLR cameras, but they are pretty expensive, so if you're looking for something that is more affordable, Nikon and Canon are also very good, but not as good as Sony. But they do still get the job done and are much cheaper and are more user friendly. You may also want to consider investing in a tripod or a flash gun. We'll go over why later in the video, but even the cheapest you can buy of either of these will serve you just fine. This is the most important part of taking a photo, composition, which means getting all the elements in your photo properly placed and posed. These are some of the popular composition arrangement templates that professionals often use. Let me help explain this information to you a bit better. First of all, you need to make sure that the main subject of your photo, so if it's a person, then them, is placed centered to the overall frame and that nothing is obscuring them, unless it's done on purpose, like if they're hiding behind something. Secondly, the objects or other people around them are evenly spaced apart and don't draw attention away from the main subject. And third, make sure the main subject is fully viewable, or at the very least, the parts that you see of them seem well presented and the background of the image has the right amount of focus and light to it. We'll get into light and focus in a bit, but this is what you should always keep in mind when shooting any photo. So, as an example, this is good composition and this is bad. Where have my eyes gone? If you're doing a studio photo shoot, you can manage that yourself, but in a non-controlled environment, it can be harder to manage the composition, especially if you're photographing wildlife. Or children. Same difference really. So timing is also highly important in this situation, and in that case, it's often best to set the camera to speed shutter or multi-photo mode, or just take as many photos as you can as fast as you can, and then look at the best one within the set and use that one. Of course, it doesn't matter how well composed a photo is if you can't see what you've taken a photo of, so that's where the lighting comes in. By and large, unless you're shooting in a studio, the ambient light is never enough to properly light a photo, so this is where lighting aids come in, like the flash. No, not that flash. Most DSLRs these days have a flash built into them, and they normally are quite good, but sometimes you need something more powerful. This is where flash guns come in, and like I said before, even the cheap ones will provide the necessary light you need for a photo. However, there are also ways to help your camera get more light internally using their settings. Cameras these days often have an automatic mode, which is designed to automatically allow the ideal amount of light into the body of the camera, and these normally do a pretty good job, but it's often more fun to turn on manual and do it yourself. The light intake of a camera can be altered with 4 settings: aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and exposure gain. The aperture, also known as the f-number or f-stop, changes how much the internal shutter is open before a picture is taken, which allows more light to come into the body of the camera. The shutter speed is rather self-explanatory. It changes how quickly the shutter flickers when a photo is taken, so the longer it takes, the more light is captured in the shot. However, this can be a double-edged sword because it also affects how motion is captured, but we'll get into that in a bit. The various wheels that you see on the body of the camera are the things that affect these settings, though which one does which can normally differ depending on which model. The ISO is how sensitive to light the camera's digital sensor is, meaning that even phone cameras can have their ISO changed. And finally, the exposure compensation. This is something that can be changed even in automatic mode. It digitally overcompensates the amount of exposure of the shooting area if it's too dark. All of these elements work in tandem with each other, and getting them all balanced can be a bit of a pain, so it's worth practicing to get it down pat. There's also white balance, which changes the internal camera's colour perception, so it's worth messing with that to try and get the right mood that you want. Also, there's stability, as I mentioned. The shutter speed changes how quickly a photo is taken, but this means that if you took a picture of something that is moving, then it'll all be blurry, so be sure to use the setting with caution when shooting moving objects. It's also best to keep the camera as steady as possible when taking a photo, and that's where the tripod comes in, or a Steadicam rig, as even with the perfect settings, if a camera's wobbling about, then the photo will look like this. And I get motion sickness just looking at something like this. Of course, much like the lighting, it doesn't matter if the photos are well shot if the primary subject is not in focus. This one's a lot easier to understand. Most DSLR and phone cameras have an autofocus tool that works by tapping the screen on the part of the image that you want to have in focus, or alternatively you can select it with the buttons. However, if you don't want to use this function, or if your camera doesn't have it, then there's usually a focus wheel on the lens, and by turning this you can change the plane of where the lens is looking. This one could probably have its own course, but there's always things that you can do to enhance and even fix photos once you've shot them, by using programs like Photoshop and GIMP. You'd think they would have picked a different name for that one. This is a brief run through of some of the simple things you can do. You can change the saturation and colour balance of a photo, which can change the visual mood of it, same with altering the light balance, and even remove elements entirely and replace them with other things, if you're skilled enough to do that. And there you have it, the basics of how to take the perfect photo. And armed with this knowledge, you're ready to go out into the world and start taking photos. Just be responsible with what you shoot. The world's got enough paparazzi in it already. The things we've taught you in this course could be very useful in helping you get a head start in our social media marketing or video marketing courses. So, if you want to check out more of what we've got, check out more of our courses here at the DigitalGrads Academy.